Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome back to another episode of the InterDrone Podcast, your 30,000-foot view of the commercial drone industry. My name is CJ Smith, joined today with Michael Peel, chairman of InterDrone, and our guest today, Tom Walker. He's the CEO of DroneUp. DroneUp provides end-to-end services for autonomous missions. Really excited to have Tom on today. He's a thought leader in the industry. He's a close friend of the show. He was a keynote speaker last year, and they've got some really exciting stuff going on with regards to some drone deliveries, partnerships with Walmart. Excited to kind of ask him some questions about what's top of mind for DroneUp and how they're making an impact during kind of times of COVID and what's most important for them while we wrap up the year. So thanks again for joining us. If you wouldn't mind just giving the audience a brief overview of your background and how you made it into the drone space, and then maybe a little bit about DroneUp and what's top of mind. And if you could keep it a little bit brief, I know we'll get into that stuff a little bit deeper when we get to the interview portion of the podcast. But if you could just frame it up for our listeners.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to the show. My background was I was a career military officer, and part of what I did specifically in the last half of my career was around innovating and iterating to use new technologies to support forces in the battlefield. And I think it was that kind of background. And then once I left the military, I went in and was the president of a technology company where we continued to be innovative and iterative. So I think it was kind of all of that. And then of course my interest in aviation and then the aviation community. I had to transition my life from jumping out of planes to trying to figure out how to stay in them. And then ultimately unmanned just seemed like an interesting place to go. So that's kind of my background and how I got into it. And DroneUp is, very briefly, we consider ourselves innovators in the industry. We're not about one particular service. Yes, we're a global end-to-end drone services company and aerial data collection, but we also provide program development, program management, training, but more importantly, working with organizations to not just say, here are drones and they're the solution for everything, but rather, how do we make this fit into your business process so that it either increases the value of your product, decreases your cost, or ultimately generates additional revenues for your organization. And actually, we look for the business solution behind drones, not just the implementation of them for drone's sake.
Great. And again, thanks for being here. If anyone's tuning into the podcast for the first time, we talk about a couple articles from the past week, and then we shift gears and do a brief interview with our podcast guest. So the first article I want to touch on, drone carries a human kidney over the Las Vegas desert in what could be the future of organ transportation. So MissionGO is a company, and they partnered with Nevada Donor Network, an organ procurement organization. And they carried 2 organs last week. This is actually on September 17th. They transferred corneas to a hospital about 2.5 miles away, and they actually delivered a kidney 10 miles as well. So both of these deliveries were for research purposes only, but it's kind of a big step. The United States discards over 3,500 kidneys a year, and 12 people actually die each day, according to the National Kidney Foundation. So, Tom, I'd love to get your perspective on this. What does this feat mean for drone deliveries and our industry as a whole?
Well, I think, there's been so much focus on beyond visual line of sight, long range delivery. And one of the things that, going back, if you've been listening to anything that I've been talking about for the last few years, it's what can we do today? And what can we do within the constraints of what we have? And a lot of these immediate campus deliveries, people don't think about it when I say a campus. I mean a hospital or a medical center campus is, you could drive something from one point to another, but if you could take it roof to roof quickly, it can greatly increase the efficiency and the time to both be able to deliver samples, immediate medical treatment, blood, you name it, transplants. And I think that we're starting to see a better focus on those kind of short range deliveries that have high value, but that also begin to create momentum for an understanding of the impact they can have. And we keep talking about if we could fly 5 miles, here's the impact we could have. And we can say that all day long. But what I like about this particular project that they did, I was actually out in Vegas at the same time doing deliveries when they were doing that, and everybody was coming up asking us, when did you deliver the kidney? And we were like, that wasn't us. But I applaud their efforts because it is those short range tests that we can do. And yes, this was just for research, but that's the first step. And I believe that we're not, it's not the too distant future before we're going to be doing this for real. And we got to start with baby steps. And I think that was a good move. I liked the operation that they did. It appears to have been well run, and it got a lot of good press and good media coverage out in Vegas.
What do you think about scaling, Tom? Because that was one of the concerns I saw on Twitter from the Dronerati. You know, that the medical kind of projects are nice, but are we ever going to see them at scale? And then what would it actually take to get them to a more kind of scaled version? Because there's a lot of setup in delivering kind of sensitive organs, right? It takes multiple people to begin with. So how much are we actually saving by using the drone, and what it's going to take to actually increase the level at which we can do these deliveries?
You know, I get asked this question a lot. Scaling is a result of two things. It is or three things, actually. It is a result of policy, it is a result of process, and it is a result of technology. And it is all three of those things together. And I think too often we try to address it as a single problem. How do we scale? Well, we scale through understanding the policies and how we operate. And those policies are very much influenced by data. I talk about out there when we were in the deliveries we're doing right now is let's put numbers on the board. It's one thing to go to the FAA and say, I can do this at scale. Trust me. And how many have you done? Well, I've done 3, or I've done 4, or I've done 5. It's a totally different thing when you go to the FAA and say, I would like to modify my ConOps to be able to do this at scale. Well, how many have you done? I've done 5,000 residential deliveries, and here's the way that we've done it. So I think the first part of it is being able to put policies, being able to demonstrate that we put points on the board by doing it safely, and then modifying our ConOps, and then leveraging not just today's technologies, but the technologies that those of us in the industry are iterating right now. I do believe that we can do it at scale, but we're not going to do it based on today's specific environment. It's going to take some work, and that's why what we're doing, for example, the delivery operations we're doing for Walmart, what they did with the delivery, those 2 deliveries out in Vegas, that is putting points on the board that are going to allow us to begin to prove that we can scale.
And what do you think about companies like Zipline, who are, I guess, putting points on the board in a different country, but they're getting that data and building those samples back to the United States and the FAA?
Yeah. So I applaud anybody who is out there trying to innovate and iterate and leverage the regulations and the policies we have today to begin to lay a foundation and a groundwork and a path to the future. I applaud anybody. Everybody can dissect, how Zipline is doing their project. People can dissect, we're doing ours. And, the Dronerati, I liked that earlier, and I'll talk about that later on in the conversation. Our industry has a habit of going after itself rather than supporting itself moving forward. So when you ask me, what do I think of other people's efforts? I applaud any effort right now that begins to demonstrate that we have the professionalism, that we have the operational capabilities to work within the framework of existing policy to begin to prove what is. So I appreciate what they're doing. Not everything that we need to do right now can be done inside of the CONUS. So taking those opportunities, and look, by the way, what they're doing down there is delivering items to people in need that otherwise would not be able to get it. So there's anybody that has anything negative to say about that operation is I think doesn't have the right perspective on what the operation's all about.
Right. There's sometimes it gets lost in the, is this good for us as an industry thing, which I see a lot of people fight over constantly. Like what is the drone industry brand supposed to mean? And it's not really a thing, right? It all comes out of the individual efforts, the partnerships, and the innovation as we see others succeed and then try to model our patterns after them. So yeah, I mean, I always enjoy talking with you for kind of one step back perspectives like that, Tom.
Great. Well, let's talk about the second article in Walmart using drones to deliver COVID-19 tests. Walmart launched a pilot drone delivery program that will drop off COVID-19 tests to homes within a 1 mile radius of the North Las Vegas store. Customers will receive a text from DroneUp with the Quest Diagnostics test on its way, and depending on where there are cars and trees, the kits will land on the people's driveways, front sidewalks, or backyard. Delivery will take as little as 5 minutes and be free. So, Tom, what can you tell us about this partnership and about some of the work you guys are making?
Yeah, this operation is probably one of the most exciting, and as you know, we've had a lot of exciting operations, but this one here is probably one that's the most near and dear to my heart, because it goes back to everything that I've been saying about what our industry needs to do. First off, we are exploring the ability to deliver packages within 1 to 1.1 mile radius of retail operations, right? And in this particular case, we're delivering COVID test kits through a great partnership with Walmart and Quest Diagnostics. And it's really, it's a very streamlined operation. They go online, they apply, they put in the request. Instantly through an API, the Walmart pharmacy gets a notification. Within 5 minutes, our team has the kit and they're attaching it to the drone through software that we've developed that allows us to identify the home. It dynamically creates a route that minimizes flight over people and flight over moving vehicles. We went into this operation, it started officially on the 13th, and we went into this with an anticipation that we would deliver about 50% of them by drone, and then 50% of them have to be delivered by van. That was kind of what we were expecting. As of today, we have delivered 100% of the test kits that have been ordered via drone. We've not had a single hand delivery. And I think that is a lot driven by the environmental conditions of North Las Vegas. It's flat. The sky's pretty clear. The conditions we don't have a lot of, other than wind, the Santa Ana winds coming out of the mountains. We don't have rain. We don't have all those kind of conditions. So it's been a great place to start this test. And the thing I'll tell you that's been the most, I think, impactful on me from this operation so far is the response from the community. You've seen other operations, and I know you guys are familiar with where people are a little bit hesitant. Why is the drone flying over my house? And why is this? We've had no fewer than 100 people come up to the site where we're doing these deliveries and go, when can I have this start delivering to my house? And when can I have pharmaceuticals and over-the-counter medications and prescription medications? The media and the press, both locally and nationally, have been extremely receptive. In fact, I would argue that the only people who've had any real negative things to say about what we're doing in Vegas have been our own industry, which again is kind of goes back to this whole prototypical, are we on the same team trying to move our industry forward, or are we just trying to figure out a way to break each other down?
Yeah, interesting. I just kind of want to follow up on a little kind of technical thing you said. So the environment in which you were actually running these deliveries. So I think about New York City and the skyscrapers, and I think about Las Vegas, and there aren't as many, right? So
Right.
that's one of the factors there. What are some other kind of either places or next step opportunities do you think this type of operation could be used for?
October, well, just so you know, I don't know if it was in the article, but on October 13th, we launched the same operation in Chautauqua, New York, just outside of Buffalo. So we're going to have the opportunity to test this again in a new environment. Obviously, upstate New York is slightly different than North Las Vegas. But one of the things that I've been saying for a very long time, and you got to back up and understand that, if I could just add this in, DroneUp was never a delivery company, right? We were an innovative company that sometimes filled gaps where we felt like gaps needed to be filled. And because everything we focus on is kind of that short range impact, what can we do today that both creates opportunities for today, but also drives innovation for the future, we kind of found ourselves by happenstance involved with delivery through our relationship and partnership with UPS, which led to the partnership with Walmart. But one of the things that I've been saying for a long time is we need to be doing over-the-counter medication delivery by drones today, not tomorrow, not next week, not whenever. One of the recent studies that we did pointed out that if you could deliver over-the-counter medications to just 10% of the people who lived within 1 mile of pharmacies in the United States during flu season, we would decrease the number of human-to-human interactions by 174 million a year. And if you start thinking about it, what's the worst time for people to be going into pharmacies during flu season? 60% of the over-the-counter medications are sold, right? So when you think about not just using drones for drone's sake, but using drones for a truly positive impact, let's keep all of those people who have flu symptoms out of pharmacies because they're going to get over-the-counter medications. Let's deliver those to them at home for free. And there's ways to fund that and finance that. So if you ask me where I see the next big move, I would say prescription and over-the-counter medications. They're light. They're easily transported. They fit within the constraints of the equipment and platforms that are available today. And it not only creates opportunities for people to safely get those without having to leave their house when they feel like they feel, but I think it can have a positive impact on the health and wellness of our country, and also minimizing costs for those people who ultimately end up in an emergency room.
That was actually one of my favorite use cases, and I've brought it up a couple times on this podcast. But I believe you guys, DroneUp, and I think it was maybe CVS, or you guys partnered to do some prescription deliveries out in Virginia to seniors' residents, so they wouldn't have to go into the pharmacy and fulfill their prescriptions during times of COVID. And so I thought that was, to your point there, I mean, I think that's an easy win, that's easy and quick to implement and save lives right away.
Yeah, and also kind of one of the things we've been talking about is how remote operations or just automation in general could eliminate human contact in these times we find ourselves in. But not every use case for that has been sensible, right? So why do you think this one is so much more certain? What were the kind of indicators to you that this operation was possible?
Which operation specifically?
Well, actually, anything involving the delivery of pharmaceuticals or tests to people remotely.
Well, first off, when we say remotely, I'm still talking about that 1 mile radius around the pharmacy, right?
Okay.
And if we think about the 1 mile radius around the pharmacy, if you take all of the major pharmacies and places that, not just pharmacies, but convenience stores and places that sell over-the-counter medication, 240 million live within 1 mile of one of those pharmacies in the United States. So first off, if you just sheer numbers makes it feasible, right? If we talk about that. Secondly, is we know that every time somebody uses an over-the-counter medication versus having to go into the healthcare system for a prescription, that it saves the healthcare system $7 every single one of those over-the-counter medication dispensaries. So if you start thinking about, we're talking about short range, we're talking about a population density that is, almost 3/4, if not more, of the United States. It's light. Our platforms can handle it. Our automated systems are already proven through the operations we're doing with Walmart and others that we can safely deliver them. I mean, Mike, you start adding all those things up, and to me, it kind of just lays itself out as a feasible, reasonable solution. Yeah, are we going to be delivering televisions? Not anytime soon. But over-the-counter medication, you're talking about the average package that walks out of a pharmacy weighs less than 10 ounces. That is a pretty light, easily deliverable package, and if you drop it, you're not going to hurt anybody.
Light.
Much lighter than and much more healthy, I think.
Yeah, no kidding.
Science says.
Great. Well, let's jump into this third article, guys, and then we'll shift gears and do the interview with Tom. So DJI has been under a lot of scrutiny the past few months about data privacy, security. So they've introduced what is called DJI Local Data Mode, which essentially works as a kill switch, blocking any of the apps from sending data back and forth over the internet. This includes data being sent to DJI or third-party servers. When using DJI's drone apps, data is often sent between the app and DJI to allow for software updates, firmware updates, and collect relevant data such as location data, maps, geofencing, etc. So to prove that the DJI local data mode does what it says it does. DJI actually, they got the help of an independent auditor, FTI Consulting, to prove that no data was actually being sent back. So I think this is interesting. This is a DJI obviously taking a step to combat what many people are nervous about with regards to data. Or a question which needs answering for me is that, and I think the article brought this up. So if I'm in local data mode, that means my drone is not sending data back. Now, if I'm not in local data mode, does that now indicate that my drone is actually sending data back? So I think this is a really interesting kind of step that DJI is taking. Mike, what do you think about this? Is this kind of alleviate some concerns, and do you think this will actually change anything in regards to kind of the our country's outlook on these aircraft?
Well, it's something interesting kind of got brought up there, which is this is a harder PR battle to win because you're making people aware that there's a security vulnerability
To begin with.
all, right?
Right.
So it's like, how do you walk back that negative? It's kind of it's very hard.
You're almost admitting that there was something, and now you've created something to stop it.
Well, yeah, but to that point, I mean, all systems are vulnerable, right? Unless you're using like high-level encryption, and there's always, even then, 0-day vulnerabilities that people don't catch. And it's sad to say that even one of the top drone manufacturers in the world, there aren't as many engineers trying to solve those security problems at DJI, let's say, than there are in, let's say, data centers that we have. So to assume that we have the best of the best on the problem would probably be no. The thing is, I think DJI is going to continue to do everything they think they can to try and win the PR battle, because there's a lot of market share to be lost if they don't. And I think, every good effort they put forth still is, it has to be independently audited, because they're already fighting the perception that they're not able to be honest about this. And my kind of feeling that if we're going to talk about DJI security vulnerabilities, we should talk from the actual technicalities outwards, working back from them as first principles rather than presuming the worst and starting from there, because you're putting a teapot in space. Then you gotta prove me that it exists.
I think that you guys both nailed this one. I mean, this one's been talked about a lot, and the reality is I have criticism for both sides of this. One is that I've been saying for a very long time, we as an organization who use these platforms have a responsibility for ensuring the security of the data that we collect. And whether I'm using a phone that is made in a foreign country, an iPad that's made in a foreign country, a geocode device that's made in another country, or a drone that's made in another country, at the end of the day, I, as an organization, have the responsibility for ensuring that the security protocols protect the data that I'm collecting. We've been aware of this for a very long time. The drones are not the first piece of technology that we've had imported from other countries that we've learned how to use safely. Your point is a really good point, and I'm always hesitant to be critical of anybody doing anything, because the reality is I'm not trying to run their show or do what they're doing or see the world from their perspective. But I do believe that DJI has not handled this very well from a PR standpoint. And to your point, coming out and saying, we've got this local mode now to protect you. Well, protect me from what? Wait a minute. I thought I had this under control, but now you're telling me you got this local mode. It's kind of like right before your doctor's getting ready to do surgery, out of the blue saying, let me explain to you the 312 investigations that are going on in my practice right now. Wait a minute. I wish you told me that before I got on the operating table.
Right.
So I personally am not a big believer that the data that we're collecting in these platforms is being streamed back to foreign countries. Our own security team, and that we have a pretty good software and security team, has analyzed this. I think the local mode is good. I think it's probably going to make a handful of people feel more comfortable, but the people who are adamantly opposed to these products it's not going to change a thing.
I think that's a good point. It seems like there's just camps at this point, and they're rigid camps, right? I also don't see the conversation going away anytime soon. And best case outcome, there'll just be some opportunities for other players in the market to actually take up market share, and we have a more diverse ecosystem. Worst case outcome, somebody who's ignorant of the technology makes a sweeping law or regulation that is the detriment to all drone technology. And I guess we're just in wait and see mode until we know one or the other.
And the other thing you got to remember too is, with the exception of a handful of handmade things you're going to buy on Etsy, we are a global manufacturing world today. We don't,
Right.
we don't, there's very few products that you're going to buy, especially if they're electronics or they're digital or they're any high quality. They're all manufactured in a single country. And there's reasons for that. Economics at the very foundation of that, just, it doesn't make sense. And so what we've got to do, I believe, is to continue to understand security protocols and ways to protect ourselves that do not prevent us from being scared to buy globally manufactured products. Because if you're scared to buy them, you're going to quit buying products, because we're going to be a global manufacturing company.
Interesting to what you were saying before too about like who's accountable, right? And the enterprise IT department is accountable for investigating whether or not these platforms are secure before using them, right? Then you, as a software provider, there's all sorts of levels of compliance, SOC 1, 2, 3, that that can act as your guidelines. Your internal security evaluation, and then talking to the kind of the world we live in, where we're sourcing parts from different areas. It's very different than, let's say, 50 years ago, if we were talking aviation, where you knew where the screw was made in Germany. So there might actually, because these conversations are happening more and more, there might be something that develops, not necessarily within our industry, but that is more concerned about following that supply chain to trace back failures. And if you want to do business internationally, then that kind of certification or supply chain tracking will be just expected. I think these are kind of just this is the birth of these concerns and yeah, growing pains. We're a pretty innovative species. I think we'll figure it out.
And the last thing I'll add to that, by the way, is we do operations now all over the world. We just flew in Ireland and Scotland last week, and we've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to work with a lot of different organizations, and we hold one of the biggest state and local contracts for the entire United and the U.S. territories. And I can tell you that as of today, there has not been a single project that we have lost because we did not have. They refused to allow us to fly, foreign-made drones, and I think that's interesting, because everybody talks about how it's risky to the industry, and nobody wants to use them, and everybody's opposed to them. And I got to tell you, from where I'm sitting in my chair, we're not seeing that. We hear a lot of talk about it, but we have yet to have a major opportunity go away because we couldn't provide. Because at the end of the day, the truth is, these are good products. They're reliable. They're affordable. And if you put all the kind of minutia and noise aside, what does the client want? They want the job done right, safely, by the right product. And I don't know if other people are seeing it, but I will tell you, we have not encountered that, not to the degree that you would think the conversation and noise would indicate.
This kind of echoes your comments in the keynote last year about regulation not necessarily being the thing holding us back, right? That it becomes, and I've seen this. Let's look outside of the drone industry for just half a second. Like, you'll see people blaming their lack of productivity on, well, it's COVID, right? It's that type of kind of outside, all-encompassing excuse you can make. And I do think our industry has a habit of kind of buying into those for not understanding the actual limitations of what their idea is. And when they hit the wall, it's like, oh, it's regulation. Oh, it's enterprises are scared by security. But yeah, I do think security is an interesting conversation to continue having, though, because it clearly wasn't thought about on the level that it should have been kind of in the early days.
Tom, you touched on it briefly at the beginning, but how did your career take you into the drone industry? And then how was your experience in the Navy kind of helped you in aviation, and then also just as a CEO in an emerging technology industry?
It's a good question. It's one I get a lot, and I actually have changed the answer. I mean, you guys know we're in this industry and you get interviewed a lot and you ask them a question, and finally one day you sit back and you listen to your answer and you go, that's not actually true.
Time to recalibrate.
Yeah. And, so back up and look at my early part of my career. I was an enlisted guy and I was a nuclear engineer on submarines. And one of the things that I kind of realized the impact that had on me that really stuck to me throughout my entire career was when you went out on a submarine and you submerged for 6 months, you didn't get to call back and ask for support from home base on how to fix things. And you didn't have an unlimited supply. You couldn't run to Walmart and grab what you needed. You think about this, you've got the people that you took with you and the parts that you were able to cram into cubby holes, and you've got to maintain a nuclear reactor and keep it operating and all the everything that's going on. And so it was a very innovative environment being on submarines in the nuclear plant, because there was no, it's down, we'll figure it out. It was, it's down and it's got to be fixed today. And how do we make that happen? And I think it was kind of that being able to innovate, and I hate to say MacGyver because I don't want anybody out there thinking our nuclear power plants are stuck together with bubble gum and toothpicks, but I could tell you stories that include bubble gum and toothpicks. And then the second part of my career, I was in the special operations community, and where, if there's ever a place besides the nuclear power world where failure is not an option, it's in the special operations community when you're out supporting the operators in the field. And I think both of those kind of gave me there is a path to success. There is a path to getting it done, just like in our industry, there is a path to success. And some people tend to look down the road over the horizon a little bit. And you guys both know from listening to me over the past few years, I'm looking about right here, but I'm always saying, does this next move help the industry? Does this next move help our colleagues in the industry, and does it help accomplish what we're wanting to accomplish? So I think it is that ability to innovate, iterate with failure not an option mentality, but with an understanding that we're a team. And I wish our industry worked more as a team. And I think if we did, we could accomplish so much more. But there's just all these stovepipes. Everybody's focused on themselves, and there's occasionally you'll hear about collaboration, but the truth of the matter is, I haven't seen a lot of truly successful cross-company collaboration in our industry that's created a meaningful outcome. And I hope we see more of that in the coming months and years.
And to either of you, why do you guys think that is? And is that unique to the drone industry? I know, Mike, this came up on the podcast last week, but there's just so many invested parties in this industry, so many regulatory bodies, from public safety, police, to looking at FAA, state regulatory bodies, to then, entrepreneurs, small and large. So it just seems like there's so many parties in this industry that have so many stakeholders of different sizes and shapes. Because I don't know either, but why does it seem like we have these kind of silos of people and they don't kind of always mesh?
Well, some of it is just the money isn't enough, right? So there's not enough diversity in the market where people feel comfortable that they can share and not give up what is their footing in the market, right? The other thing, I think it's a lot of kind of just melding cultures, right? So we have traditional aviation, we do have former military, and we have Silicon Valley innovation. And if you look at the Valley's model, there's a reason they focus on mostly software, is because there's tons less friction, tons less regulation. Also less humans, right? I think a lot of the issues with the drone industry is we actually need to connect humans, but these are also highly technical humans that aren't used to connecting at the same level. But that, if you look at why people aren't collaborating, it's they're not calculating a benefit in dollars, or they're not thinking long term enough to understand that they're not going to get to dollars without making that partnership. And I think that's another thing, is that things are taking longer than people want them to, but they're also not evaluating, and this is why I really like talking with Tom, just how much we're capable of doing today. And this is, I'll never forget when Michael Blades told me 2, maybe 3 years ago, when I was, like a BV loss parrot at that point. He's like, you could do a lot without BV loss, right? And he just explained all the inspection, and I knew all of these things. I could list them all myself. I've talked about them in marketing, but they're just, looking towards the next thing rather than looking at what is capable and scalable now.
And Mike, the answer is spot on, and I say this all the time. Our industry is a heavily invested industry right now. There are not a lot of companies in our industry that are spinning off big profits and big revenues and building big bank accounts. And that curve, when you guys remember how excited we were when Goldman Sachs and everybody said we were going to be a $970 trillion a year business in the next 4 months, or whatever the crazy numbers were, and everybody got excited about that. And that curve was a little slower, and for all the right reasons, right? We weren't ready to be flying all over the place in BVLOS, and we weren't ready to have unrestricted access to the airspace by every Tom, Dick, and Larry. So it took a little longer, and it should have. But that creates a lot of strain on an industry. It's new, it's emerging, it's got a lot of money invested. Early investors are looking for opportunities, and they're looking for either to start seeing some return on those, or start looking at exits. And when that pressure happens at the point our industry is in right now, the ability to think this partnership is going to do this, this, and this, and within the next 2 years, it's going to create this opportunity. People are like, 2 years? I need something in 2 months. And so I do think you were right on the money when you said that COVID didn't help that situation for a lot of our colleagues in the industry. I mean, for some, it was I don't want to say it was a positive thing, because it just sounds terrible to say that, but it had a positive impact. I can say that on some of us in the industry. I think on others it didn't, but I would say the majority of our industry, it didn't, unfortunately, as I go out and talk to people in the industry. But I think in the service provider world it did. But I think in the other areas of manufacturing and so forth, it probably didn't have the same impact.
Right. I mean, that's an important thing to kind of understand is, you look at Skydio's delay on productions this year, and that has to be a direct, and even DJI experienced it, and they're a much, much larger, more established company at this point. And it's just a matter of, if you have to pause manufacturing for a week, that's a huge global impact to what can happen. So yeah, hardware is hard normally. It's even harder in these conditions. But like you said, there's software and services that clearly have an opportunity to grow here. And what we've noticed, because we've been tracking the venture capital, is kind of this gutting of the middle happening, where it's Series A and Series B are closing up shop because their exits are nowhere near, whereas Series C are now becoming D, E, F. And there's actually a lot of seed capital being invested in completely new projects, because people have a better understanding of the market, they see newer opportunities, and they feel more comfortable actually on the long-term bet there than on a company that's operating in the current environment and not profitable yet.
Yeah, one of the sayings that a guy told me the other day on the phone is, he said, turning hard left to not drive off the cliff is not the same as a pivot. And I said, I get it.
That's a good one, yeah. Tom, in your keynote last year, you had a memorable statement. You said that people in the drone industry started a business in an industry not knowing what it was they were going to be selling to customers who didn't know what it was they're going to be buying in an environment which nobody had figured out how to regulate. So we're a little over a year from InterDrone 2019. How do you kind of look at that statement today? Does that still stand true? And have we made progress?
Well, I'd say it stands true that we all did those things, and when we started the industry. But I mean, the question I think you're asking is do we have a better idea of what it is we're selling, and do the customers have a slightly better idea of what they're buying? And has the industry somehow figured out how to regulate itself? And I think those answers are all different. I believe that we're still figuring out what it is we're selling, right? I mean, I'm a drone services company, as DroneUp 10.5 months ago didn't have the word delivery in any of my marketing collateral. It was not a topic of discussion in any of my meetings. And now today it's a fraction, it's a small fraction of what we do in terms of revenues, but it is our industry finding the gaps and filling them. So we are getting better. Um, our customers, I will tell you, if there's a huge change, it's there. They now know what they're. It's interesting because I'm actually getting phone calls, and I apologize, my dog is downstairs barking if you can hear it. Um, but we actually have customers who call and say, we're looking for 2D orthos of this particular problem, or we're looking for cut and fill analysis, or I mean, it's like that is huge. That's a huge change. And I think that's come from what you guys do and the shows and the education and everything that we've done there. With the regulatory thing, I will tell you that one thing that's different today, and people say when I say this that I'm being a shill for the FAA, and I'm not, is one thing that I learned was a year ago, I wouldn't pick up the phone and call the FAA and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this operation. What do you think?" I mean, I was hiding from the FAA. I didn't want to have a conversation with them. And I mentioned this on a previous conversation that we had. Today, we have an open dialogue with the FAA. When we talked about what we're going to do with Walmart, we talked about what we're going to do with NATO. And the FAA will take our calls, and immediately within a day, we're on the phone, we're having a conversation. And I actually asked the guy, one of the senior guys at the FAA recently, I said, "What changed?" And he said, "You guys are calling us. I mean, you wouldn't call us before." And I think, so I don't think from a regulatory standpoint, I mean, what policy has changed in the last year since I made that announcement? I mean, since I gave that speech, I don't think a single major policy change has happened. But certainly the cooperation and the ability to work together with the FAA has changed dramatically. So I think we've made progress, but yeah.
So that seems like two cultural shifts right there, because I'm not sure if you called the FAA 2 years ago, they would have been as, but I guess there was a realization that led to them marketing that, hey, we want to talk, or being more open about that in the public sphere. That led to companies feeling more comfortable talking to them in the first place. And then also just having companies that actually know enough to talk to them, right? So that's a big factor where I think, especially early days with the tech people, there was an estimation that they were going to be able to skirt around that because the regulators just don't understand it. So we're going to, bulldoze our way through. And that's not the case in aviation, clearly.
Yeah, and I think you're right on the second part of that as well. And I think the FAA, there's been some pressure, maybe it's a strong word, but some encouragement from the administration and those within the framework of the federal government to begin to see some success in our industry with an understanding that BVLOS isn't going to be the magic wand that makes everything happen. So I think that's also, to your point, has made the FAA a little more collaborative in terms of non-BVLOS types of operations that perhaps we wouldn't have discussed in detail. A great example of that is delivery. If you remember, a year ago, the general consensus was you cannot deliver packages under Part 107. I mean, that was the rule, right? You cannot do it.
Right.
And the second part of that rule was even if you could, it wouldn't scale because of blank, blank, and blank. And now look at us a year later where we're doing 1,000 residential deliveries, and at a scale that is higher than they can do it by vehicle, and is not in any way constrained or restricted by BVLOS. So, I mean, we've come a long way, but it took both our industry leaning into it a little bit, and it took the FAA being willing to be collaborative. And I've seen both of those things happen. And that's, to me, one of the most exciting things of our industry in the last year.
That's so true, because I think about the way that Google's initial Part 135 was received, right? That was the only way we were going to get to delivery, and to think that we're here months later and we're flying under Part 107, and doing deliveries. It's really interesting,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes to even just understanding what these things are, figuring out what they are from a business standpoint, and communicating that with the FAA. That makes a huge difference, because even if you look at Part 135, didn't really make sense. Like if you were to take each word by the letter, that's what you'd be able to do if you declared yourself an airline, you know?
Right.
Yeah. There's like the language in that regulation, or that part of the regulation, is clearly, you know, around a commercial type airliner. So yeah, the FAA wants data. They want to be in communication. They want to know what's happening, right? That's really the three kind of major things for them, because their responsibility is to the airspace, and not just to the drone industry or the commercial airliners. They're responsible to the public too.
Tom, talk to us a little bit about what it's like being kind of a part of the drone industry in the state of Virginia. I think Virginia, we had the team that put together the Virginia Fix platform on, and we were talking about how Virginia was even ranked the #1 state in the U.S. for drone business. We've seen BV loss waivers. People say Virginia's for lovers, but is Virginia really for drones and for the drone industry?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm a little bit spoiled because sometimes you don't realize it, right? It's like if you live in an air-conditioned house all the time and you don't realize what it's like to not be in an air-conditioned house until you go visit a friend who doesn't have air conditioning, and you go, wow, this really sucks.
Right.
You know, so operating in Virginia, where we could literally say, we want to do this program, and there was access to innovation money to do it, or we said, we want to do this delivery exercise that we did with UPS and others. And they say, okay, well, here's a campus that is available to you to do it. And here's all the support and infrastructure we can. That to me just seemed normal. I mean, candidly. And then you start going to other areas, and won't mention one. Just went to do an operation, and they wanted us to get business license there. They wanted us to provide a bunch of documentation. They wanted us to pay a bunch of fees just to be able to do this flight operation in there. They wanted us to pay additional taxes for every local person that we employed who we didn't provide health care for, even though they were just flying drones temporarily. And it was, it actually was almost prohibitive in doing business in that particular area, even though we were going to hire dozens of potential pilots to work there. And then I realized, wow, Virginia's really, really good. And I think that comes from the very top of the state, but we have a very specific group who is focused on unmanned systems, not just drones, but unmanned systems in general. And keep in mind, we've got Wallops here, we've got NASA, we've got the military base, and we got a lot of open land where we're used to doing aviation testing and exercises. And so it's a good area with support of the state and some good leadership, and yeah, I feel very, very fortunate that we're here. I think it took me getting out and going and visiting a couple of other areas and trying to do business to realize how fortunate we actually are here.
And what do you think it takes? Like, so it was at what government level from the state, and what buy-in is necessary to create an ecosystem like is created in Virginia?
Well, our original emphasis on this was really started, in my opinion, when Governor McAuliffe was in office. He was about drones, and he loved unmanned systems. He used to say that, he really saw the future he really understood and comprehended the future of drones and drones. You go additional to that, Senator Mark Warner, who is U.S. Senator Mark Warner, who's a senator here out in the state of Virginia. He says all the time that he made his money in cell phones and cell phone spectrums, but if he had to do it over today, he would do it in drones. I mean, so when you've got that kind of leadership from the former governor of the state, who really was the first governor to ever fly in an unmanned system, a drone here in Virginia, took off and flew around for a couple of seconds, to a U.S. state senator who so strongly endorses it, to the point of we literally have a state appointed leader for unmanned systems in the state, which not a lot of states have. It's not about money. People say, well, it's easy to be the best in the world if you're throwing around money. They're not really throwing around a lot of money. What they're really doing is providing capabilities and access to do things here that we don't, everybody says, well, you need an IPP to do that. No, what you need is airspace to do that. And what you need is a safe place to do it. And what you need is the support in terms of infrastructure and endorsement of the leadership of the state. And we have that here.
Right.
Well, it's very true, and I thank Ramon Roche every time from Drone Code for bringing this to my attention, because I always thought it's just a matter of human hours and funding that gets you to an answer, and he made the point is governance. Governance allows focus, because otherwise you could burn money and a lot of human hours to nowhere without a clear goal and somebody kind of keeping you on that.
I tell people all the time, if you gave me the choice of somebody saying, here's a lot of money, go innovate, or I'm going to stay the hell out of your way, go innovate, I'll choose stay the hell out of my way and let me go innovate over a ton of money. And I think in Virginia, by and large, a lot of latitude to do those operations. And that to me creates more innovative outcomes than just throwing money at a potential opportunity.
Well, the money has its own pull, right?
That's right.
Right. It's not no strings attached usually.
There's no such thing as no strings attached when innovation and then all of a sudden we did get one grant and one particularly nice grant and the entire focus of that grant was the outcome report that they wanted submitted. And we found ourselves feeling as though we were innovating to a report rather than innovating just to innovate. And we had to innovate to a point that the outcomes report looked good for those people who invested.
To support a case that was already established. Yeah, sure. So Tom, we touched on your partnership, DroneUp's partnership with Walmart in the CNN article a little bit, but can you talk a little bit more about that partnership? What's next? And you also mentioned, I think you're going heading up to New York. You're doing some work in New York, and maybe even something with NATO. So can you talk just a little bit about kind of what's top of mind for you as we close out this wild ride of 2020?
Sure. So, the Walmart opportunity and partnership with Walmart and Quest is to me spectacular because it gave us the opportunity to go once again test what we can do. What can we do? Not sit around the room and discuss is the right thing to do, or is it the long-term solution? But is it good for our industry today? And I think, while there are certainly those people out there who would say what we're doing in terms of 107 delivery isn't scalable, it's not the long-term solution, so why are we doing it? I think those people need to back up and understand that what we're doing is we're learning, we're gathering data. The amount of data that we gather every day, the hot washes, where we get at the end of the day and the teams discuss and go through line by line everything they learned, last about an hour every day, and the data that we're collecting is monumental. For example, we found out that with 26 Wi-Fi hotspots around, we're pretty good. But once there's 32 Wi-Fi hotspots around, we start to have problems. And we're doing spectrum analysis and down into that detail and motor temperatures overheating at different altitudes. This stuff is valuable, right? But it's not just about COVID test delivery. Let's be candid. Let's look at what are we really validating? We're really validating how we could do residential retail delivery, both short term in terms of Part 107 and within that 1 mile or less range. And then how does that fit into a 135 hub and spoke solution down the road? How can we deliver from a retail location under 107, but then use 135 point to point to move items between those stores. So it's on demand order. Those are really kind of, if you look at big picture, what I feel like we're really trying to prove and validate through these different operations. The NATO operation, I will tell you, was one of the most exciting that we did. There's going to be some videos and some other things coming out. But what we were able to test there was we created a technology that anywhere on the battlefield, if there is a need, whether it's blood, whether it's ammunition, or whether it's whatever, we had to prove that within that request coming in that we could launch a drone with the right equipment and have it deliver accurately within 2 minutes. And what we were able to do was we were able, from the time the request came in, the average time before the drone took off with the right equipment was 3 seconds, and we were delivering within about 1.5 feet accuracy anywhere in the battlefield, and that was multiple operations. As you can imagine, being in this industry, the implications in use cases for that particular technology go way beyond just battlefield resupply for NATO. So the reason I show you is there's a lot of different things we're working on in terms of technologies and everything, and that start to fit together that have plays beyond just Part 107 type of operations that do kind of seep over into longer range operations. And we're really excited. I think over the next 3 to 4 weeks, it seems like every time I have a conversation with you guys, I say this, but over the next few weeks, you're going to hear some more exciting stuff. And it's, we're very, very fortunate to be in this spot with some good partners right now.
Great. Well, any final thoughts for the InterDrone audience before we let you go?
No, I just appreciate what you guys are doing. I know in your industry that you're facing challenges that are as significant as, and I think you guys are doing a great job. I appreciate it because this messaging and these opportunities to communicate what's going on in our industry, I think are very, very valuable in just candid conversations, not pre-formatted presentations. Mm-hmm. So I applaud your efforts. I hope you guys will continue to do this.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much. And Mike says this a lot, but we try to kind of recreate the conversations which happen in the hallways at the show. So those candid conversations with our speakers and other attendees. So I want to thank everybody again for tuning in. Thank you, Tom Walker and DroneUp. This podcast will be on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever pods are casted. If you're listening to this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, ring the bell for alerts, and we will see everybody next week.